That is very, very interesting. Okay, whatever. Let's just get going on this. All right, welcome back. We are WebD6201 in the winter 2021 semester at Durham, and it's week one, part one of our broadcast for client-side scripting. Today, we're going to be doing a tool setup and an intro to JavaScript this week. Let's talk about this course and who I am and all that stuff. You know me, Nick. There we go. We got a second person coming on. I'm Tom. I've been teaching since 2011. I've got a background in software engineering and game development, and I'm currently sharing over 1,700 videos on YouTube, which is kind of something that I do. I broadcast classes on YouTube at the same time that I'm going to be live on Zoom. And I use Zoom because I feel it's a little bit more stable than some of the other platforms. So what are we doing today, and what is this course about? So today, or this week, we're going to be talking about the course outline, evaluations, the textbook, video requirements for assignments, partnering for labs, tool setup. This week, we're also going to be talking about Git and GitHub, something called progressive enhancement, which I want to talk about. And of course, there's interactive demos this day and the other day. So there's two parts to this course. The first part is usually done for you guys on Wednesday mornings, 8:10 to 10 o'clock, and Thursday mornings from 8:10 to 10 a.m. And usually in the first part, what I'll try and do is the lecture as much as I can, but I'll probably mix lecture and lab as much as possible. And that way we can have some kind of interactivity throughout the entire time. Okay, so that's the plan. My original plan was to do this part synchronously and the second part asynchronously. I think with the volume of stuff that we have this semester and we have going on, I'm probably going to do both synchronously this semester. That's the plan. All right, so good morning, Scott. How you doing? And good morning, Musa. All right, so that's the plan for today. And the course textbook is this one, John Duckett, JavaScript and jQuery, Interactive Front-End Web Development. Again, a little bit of an older book, 2014. It's a cool, okay reference for beginners in general for JavaScript. And this is kind of old school ECMAScript 5. And it talks about ECMAScript 6 a little bit because 2014, it was just kind of coming around. ECMAScript 2015 was just around the corner. So again, there's some stuff that is good in here. And one of the references for jQuery is okay, but I'm going to give you other information that's probably going to take you out of outside of what this book presents. All right, so this is kind of just a high level, kind of a broad beginner summary of how you do JavaScript. And some of the stuff that's kind of mentioned in here is JavaScript with DOM manipulation and that kind of stuff. And I think that's okay. But again, we're going to do more classes and objects and all that kind of stuff as you guys are programmers and not necessarily web developers. Okay, so let's move on. So schedule is pretty busy for this course. Lots and lots of stuff. So again, we're sitting at week 2 officially for you guys, but week 1 for the course. Why? Because last week there was like orientation, all that stuff. And I had other sections in the first part of the week, and I elected to kind of move week 1 to this week. We're still gonna cover the same quantity of material. All the material is gonna be the same. It's just that you guys are gonna be slightly shifted in terms of time frame. So what's going to happen is we're going to work from week 1 this week. And so when I say week 1 and you're in your mind, you might be, well, this is week 2 for other courses. That's okay. It's not going to be a big shift for you guys. Okay. So that's course orientation and some intro to JavaScript and stuff like that this week. Next week, we're going to get into event handlers, and the following week, we're going to get into ECMAScript 6. Following that, we're going to get into jQuery. Again, when I think about jQuery nowadays, and whether you've heard of it or not, jQuery is a helper library for JavaScript. And back in the day, it was really necessary. By the way, welcome everybody for people that are coming in a little later. Yeah, so it was a helper library for JavaScript that really helped with DOM manipulation and even styling. Because back in the day when this thing came out, jQuery has been out for a while, many years now. CSS wasn't at the level of, I would say, completeness and how good it is today. You can do a lot with CSS that you couldn't do back when jQuery was out, and JavaScript has evolved as well. And so that's why jQuery was out. It was a big help for us to do things like Ajax and a bunch of other things. So that's why it's in your course outline. And there's a lot of jQuery out there, so it's good to know. So we're into jQuery until about week 7, and then from week 8, 9, we're into Ajax, which is interactive dynamic apps. And then the most exciting part for me is after week 9, and I'll try and introduce some of this stuff earlier on, as you'll see, because I want to get you guys ready for week 10. Week 10 is really the most challenging part. Week 10, we start talking about Node.js and Express, as well as MongoDB by the end. So where it says week 13 for me, that's really your week 14. And I'm working with Austin, which is the other professor that's doing this course. And we're just realigning some of the assignments right now. So for example, lab 1 says 5%, and so on. And so when the original outline looks like this, so again, 50% for labs and 40% or so for tests. And these tests were originally, practical. That's what they were for JavaScript, jQuery, and so on. And I think they're going to remain that way. But they're 40% for tests and 10% for in-class exercises or discussions is what they were called. So we're still going to do this. But some of the weightings for the tests and the labs will be changed, and the timing will be changed. And I'll announce those things with another outline update similar to what you see here, probably next week. Okay, so again, but I want you to think about for next week, we're going to get together and do a lab. I will when I post a lab for you. It will be probably due the week after. It takes a bit of time for you to do some stuff with JavaScript. It's not like how we did our labs. For those people who had me last semester for OOP 3200, we did our labs kind of by Sunday, and it was done. And you're working with a partner. So, and that's fine. We're probably still going to do that. But the thing with this is, it's going to take a little longer than just a few days to produce this. So that's why I'm going to give you like the next week to do it. So again, it's not going to affect the way we do much. It's just that the labs will there's probably going to be less of them. So instead of having like, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 8 labs or whatever it was, there's probably going to be only like 4 or 5, let's say. And they're all going to be worth at least 10%. So they're going to be heftier, but they're also going to be something that you can work on with a partner and get done within reason. And it's going to cover all the topics that we've talked about in class. So that's what the labs are. They're little assignments. Okay? One thing for this course is that there are assignment video requirements. And again, if you haven't had me last semester and if you had another professor, and that's totally cool. What the requirement is for me is every lab you'll be handing in, kind of your like a little video with your labs. And basically what the video will be going over is, it's not really a big video. What you're going to be really talking about is things like, hey, here's my my lab. This is who I am. My name is Tom, as an example, and I'm this is lab one as an example, and here's how it works. Show me that it works and all that kind of stuff. And then when you're showing me how it works, you're also going to talk about your code a little bit with you and your partner. That's really what it's about. So it's the same things that we've had last semester. The lab, there'll be the requirement for most labs will be something like this. It'll be a single slide to start your video that shows you and your partner. There'll be kind of a little image of you, which I'll be asking about. That's the lab. Each group member will be required to present something. And one thing that's really important, guys, that I went through last semester, and again, this is kind of an evolution when we teach remotely, is that I'm really looking to, I have to be able to see your screen and I have to be able to hear you. If I can't hear you and if I can't see your screen and if it's not clear, then really at the end of the day, your submission is not great, right? So please make sure that I can hear you and I can see your screen. Okay, that's really what the video is about. Okay, so please do that. 5 minutes approximately is what I'm looking for. Sometimes the time frame is a little bit longer because there might be more stuff involved, but try and target around 5 minutes, I would say. Excuse me. Sorry, dying here this morning. Okay, so that's kind of the assignment requirements. So all assignments or labs will have a video requirement. You'll be partnering up for labs, and what I'll be doing is in the second part, that's tomorrow, I'll put together a sign-up sheet, or I'll allow you guys to sign up for groups. Maximum group size will be 2 for this semester again, and that'll be for each of your labs that are going to be released. Again, each partner will be required to do kind of their own piece. And then during our sessions together, starting tomorrow for you guys, I'll be asking you to submit something. It'll be an in-class exercise, and usually what it is just following along with what we're doing, testing to make sure that you can get it done. And one of the requirements that I'll be having this semester, which is going to be different than others, is that you're going to also need a screenshot for your in-class exercise. So I want you to screenshot your desktop to show me that you've done the exercise, whatever it is. All right. So I don't need a full video for the exercise that we do in class, just a screenshot. Okay. So that's really the structure of the course and what we're doing. I want to talk about JavaScript before we get into the downloads and all that stuff. JavaScript is probably one of it powers the web in many ways, right? Without JavaScript, modern web applications don't work, right? So it is kind of a lead-in into other frameworks like Angular and React and Vue. There's a bunch of other frameworks out there, front-end frameworks that make the web more exciting than what it is. So for now, what we're going to do is we're going to start with downloading tools, and then on our tomorrow session, we're going to do Git and GitHub overview. Next comment is, before I sign up for school, again, everywhere I look said JS is the most used language. I agree. JavaScript is the most used language, but it's the most misunderstood language in many ways, and some people really hate it or love it. There's kind of two schools of, two camps, if you will, on this one. Let's start with the download. So what I want you to do is, for us to be successful with JavaScript this semester, we're going to be using an editor called Visual Studio Code. All right, we're not going to be using C++ editors like, for example, Visual Studio or Eclipse or something weird like that. It's going to be Visual Studio Code. All right, so we're all going to use this. It's not an option for you guys to use something else. I mean, if you really want to, you can, but you're going to see that there's a great disadvantage if you don't follow along with all the stuff that I'm going to be doing with Visual Studio Code. So please make sure you download this one. So if you go to code.visualstudio.com, and let's bring that up. So code.visualstudio.com, it's here. And you can download the Visual Studio Code for Windows and Mac. Primarily, you can see that there's other platforms and Linux as well. I'm not really happy with the Linux, distribution. It's okay, but dragging and dropping on the screen is weird. Dragging and dropping into Visual Studio Code is weird, that I found on Linux. But otherwise, between Mac OS and Windows, it's pretty cool. So please download and install Visual Studio Code for Windows. if you're using Windows. All right, and if you do that, then what you're probably going to see when you launch Visual Studio Code is something that looks like, I'm just going to close this down because this is what we're going to be doing today. Something that looks like this. So I'm just going to say that you might have a maybe a welcome screen over here on the right, and then some kind of open folder thing on the left. All right, so when you're done launching Video Studio Code like this, please, I'd like you to indicate this on your participants panel. So again, for some people that are new to Zoom, I'd like you to try and figure this out. On the participants panel, yes, Nicholas, you got it. A check mark is what I'm looking for. There are several things you can do. You can make reactions happen, and you can also put up your kind of a thumbs up or whatever. But what I'm really looking for is a check mark. So if you can put up a check mark that basically says that you guys are good, you've downloaded Visual Studio Code. And I need you guys to do that so I know that you guys are all on board with what I'm doing. The great thing is, though, that I'm recording this video. So worst case scenario, if you don't do the downloads or installations properly, you can always look back and do it again. Okay, so I'm waiting for a couple people. Jasmail and yeah, Jasmail, I need you to put your check mark. I'm not going to look at the chat as often. There's more of you than me. So let's see if I can get you to put the check mark in on the participants panel, please. And Andre, if I can get you to do the same thing, please. Okay. Hopefully you'll be able to figure that out. It's not that difficult. There we go, Andre. Good. Jasmail, just you. All right. So yeah, so what we're doing is we've got Visual Studio Code launched. And one thing to note is when I pull up my desktop, so let's go into, I'm just going to show you my desktop in a second. So here's my desktop, and let's go into WEBD6201. I have week 1 in there. But I'm going to call this week 1A because you guys are the second group that I've done this week. So let's go into new folder, call it week 1A. So let's suppose I make a folder like week 1 or week 1A on your desktop somewhere. And then what I can do is I can drag and drop it inside of here. So if I drag and drop it on this side, you can see that immediately you're going to see it reflects what I've done on the Explorer window here inside of here. So mine's just called week 1A. You can call yours week 1. It's not a big deal. Okay, week 1A. I'm just going to clear this up. Thank you for that. So one thing that you notice with Visual Studio Code is it's not like an IDE. What you see is what you get. So whatever you put in here on this side is reflected immediately inside on your operating system. It's the same thing. Okay. And this has advantages and disadvantages, of course, but we'll talk about the advantages first. So that's the first step. Let's close this down now. So let's close this down and let's go to the second install. All right. And there's reasons for why I'm doing this, so bear with me and I'll explain it all. All right. The second install is git-scm.com. I want you to install Git, and you need to close down Visual Studio Code in order for you to do that. If by chance you have any command prompt open, if you have a command prompt open like this, please close it down as well in order for you to do this properly. So please don't leave a command prompt, or if Visual Studio Code is open like this, make sure you close it. All right. So we don't have Visual Studio Code running. If you're on a Mac, make sure you close the application and don't just hide it in the background, because Macs, a lot of time what they do is they just, post an application in the background. It's running in the background. It's not really closed. Make sure you right click and close the application. Okay, once it's closed, let's download, Git for Windows, and I'll talk about what Git is tomorrow in more detail, right? So, and Jackie, is it the same Git for OOP? It's absolutely the same Git. If you've already got Git from last semester, that's great. The only difference is that this is going to be on the command line as we're moving forward, whereas what we did before could have been with a tool like, for example, Gitkraken. We're not going to be using Gitkraken this semester. So we'll be doing things with command line. So as we step forward, more challenging. So if you've already done this, download and install, it's okay to do it again. It's not going to hurt you to do it. And let me explain what I'm talking about here. So let's bring up the installer. Here's the installer for me. and let's follow along with these installation steps. If you've already done this, again, from last semester, make sure you uncheck only show new options. Uncheck this and then click next. Okay. So again, download this one. By the way, there's also a download, excuse me, for Mac and Linux. So you can also do the same thing with Linux, although Mac and Linux also have, sorry about that, something. They also have Git installed for their terminals automatically, which is okay, right? So let's click next. So what I want is everything here except for check daily for Git for Windows updates. Okay. We don't want to do this. That would be a little bit annoying for you. Click next. Notice now it says, hey, which default IDE do you want to use? Do you want to use Visual Studio Code? Do you want to use Notepad++? I'm choosing Visual Studio Code, and that's why I got you guys to download it first. So let's use Visual Studio Code as Git's default editor. Click next. The next one is, and this is my screen, adjusting the name of the initial branch in new repositories. This is a new download. And there's two options, let Git decide and override the default branch. Let's leave it as let Git decide and click next. The next one is adjusting your path environment. This is important. Make sure that you say use Git and optional Unix tools from the command prompt. We want to do this, okay? And then click next. The next one is choosing HTTPS transport backend, where you want to use OpenSSL for the transport backend. So make sure you choose the first one. Click next. The next one is configuring the line ending conversions. Make sure it says checkout Windows style, commit Unix style line endings. This is kind of the default. Next. The next one is not the default. I've asked you to choose Windows default console window for configuring the terminal emulator to use with Git Bash. Guess this is the one I want you to use. Okay, next. The next one is the default. It's fast forward or merge. So it's where it says choose the default behavior of Git pull, fast forward or merge. Click next. And then this is a new option. And I'd like you to use this one, Git Credential Manager Core, which is new, and it overrides the deprecated Git Credential Manager that used to be kind of installed. And this one is cross-platform, where this one was not. This one will work with Mac and Linux platforms as well. All right, so that is Git Credential Manager. Click next. And then make sure these both are click enable symbolic links, as well as enable file system caching. Those two things are cool. And then click next. And this is the one that you're going to leave unchecked. Enable experimental support for pseudo consoles. Nope, let's leave that unchecked. And then click install. I've already done my installation. So once you click install, it'll do its little dance, installation dance. And then what you'll get is when you pull up your command prompt by going to the window button and typing in CMD, you'll get a command prompt that looks something like this. If you type in git ---- version when you're done, you should see something that looks like this. If you're on a Mac, obviously it's going to look different than this, okay? And you wouldn't pull up command prompt, you pull up your terminal on the Mac. And you can do that with command space. You can search for your terminal and then pull up your terminal on the Mac. Not a big deal. All right, so if you're with me, check marks at this point. If you're with me, X if something went wrong. And this is why I do the check mark and X thing, so that I make sure that you guys are good, I can move along, and I don't have to wait. And we're just waiting for Jasmail. If I can get you to check mark, please. You're ready to go. Okay, well, most of you are done. Hopefully, Jasmail is also done soon too. Okay, so this is the first installation step. Thank you for that. I'm going to move on. Sorry, Jasmail. And let's close this down now. So we opened this up, but I'm going to close it down again. And I need to do that because in the next step, which is Node.js, and you're going to say, wait, Node.js, isn't that a backend JavaScript library for people who know? The answer is yeah, but we're going to use Node.js for other reasons. And I'm going to install it now. So by the time we get to week 10, you've already been using Node.js. This is kind of my underlying motive for this thing throughout the entire time. All right, so let's make sure you download and install 15.5.1 current. All right, so again, the download I've already done. It's a fairly straightforward step through for Node.js. Unfortunately for me, if I redo it, notice where it says it's like, hey, do you want to do this again? It'll ask me to change or repair or remove. It really doesn't do anything. If you just follow the steps, there is nothing to really click or update. Please do not check. It'll ask you to install Chocolatey. Don't do that. Leave it alone. And once you've done that, if you just step through the Node installation with everything closed again, including command prompt, you should be okay. All right, so at the end, what you'll see, if I'm going to bring up command prompt again, at the end, what you should see is if you type in the keywords node -- version, you should get node 15.5.1. Okay, so let me know when you guys are done that. Check mark on your participants panel, please. If you can't do this, and sometimes what ends up happening, and especially with older installations, sometimes what ended up happening is with Node, it wouldn't appear on the command prompt at all. In fact, if anything, you got something like unrecognized command. Like, for example, if I put in some other weird command step like Tomo isn't recognized, you might get the same thing. If you tried node -- version, you might get node is not recognized as an internal or external command. If you get this issue, please let me know. Okay. Can you show this again, please? Jasmail, are you talking about the node installation step? Which part are you asking for? Yeah, there's nothing really to do. Like I said, you just step through it. So all you do is you download 15.5.1. That's the one you want to download. And you follow the installation steps. Do not check Chocolatey. So there's an option that there's a little checkbox for that option. Don't just leave that unchecked and continue. Okay. So again, what I'm looking for is, I'm just going to clear the screen here. Node -- version. You should see this 15.5.1. When you've got that, please indicate this on the participants panel, please. I'm still waiting for a couple of people. And okay, there's a couple of assumptions I'm going to make going forward. One, I'm going to assume that you know nothing about JavaScript, right? I'm also going to assume you know nothing about Visual Studio Code. So like if you've never used it before. All right. I'm also going to make some assumptions about your knowledge of object-oriented programming. At this point, you should know about object-oriented programming, especially the people that I've had last semester with me. We went extensively through different examples, and I'm sure your professors, other professors that you've had, have done the same thing. So object-oriented programming, knowledge of C++ and Java, you should have some of that knowledge. And JavaScript is very different in many ways from those languages, but there's also similarities because it's C-influenced language. Tom, how are we doing? I don't see you have a check mark. Are you good? Hey, great. Okay. Jasmail, are you good? Because I don't see a check mark for you. Please put a check mark in the participants panel so we can move on. All right. All right. Thank you for that. I'm moving on. Jasmail, I didn't really see it, but I'm moving on anyway because we have to move on. Okay, so that is your installation, the required installations that we put together for this. Okay, so that's kind of the stuff that we put together. And you can see that I've got my command prompt still open. I'm going to close this down, and we've done all these steps. These are all things that are listed here. One thing to note is I want you to also sign up for GitHub. If you haven't had a chance to do this already, if you don't have a GitHub account, now is the time to go to this link, github.com, and sign up for your GitHub account. You'll be needing this, requiring this for your submission, not just for your labs, but also for tests, as well as for anything else I ask you to do. Right, so please make sure you get yourself a GitHub account if you don't have one already. If you have one from previous semesters, like with me or with someone else, you don't have to do this step. But if you don't, please make sure this is done. All right, let's test out our installation. So we just finished our installation. There's some people that came in late. And for those people, I think it's shocked you came in late. You're going to have to follow the video later on to keep up, or you can follow the PowerPoint slides. The video, by the way, guys, like I said before, if you look up on DC Connect, the video is actually live right now. So if you actually go here to this link, you can step back. One thing about the video that I produce live at the same time is it gives you closed captioning support, which is, I think, important. So, so that's why I produce it. So just for those people who are international students who need additional, if English is not your first language, sometimes it helps to watch the video and then at the same time, because it gives you closed captioning, and whereas Zoom does not, right? So at least not for now. Okay, so yeah, so that's the video, and let's move into our installation testing. So what I said earlier was we had on the desktop, we had that little folder that I made for WEBD6201. There was two actually. If I look at WEBD6201, you can see that there's two folders, week 1 and week 1A. You guys are week 1A, right? And if I pull up Visual Studio Code, again, you can see that week 1A is here. What we're going to need before we continue with VS Code is VS Code is extensible. So notice I have a bunch of little buttons here, and you don't. All right, if you've just installed Visual Studio Code for the first time, you won't have all this, and you don't need all of it. You need some of it. Let's talk about the stuff that you need. Okay, so I want you to go into extensions. Please go in there in VS Code, and this is where I want you to start installing some stuff. You can see that I have a lot of them. You don't need all of mine. But what I want you to do is I want you to go and look for, if you type in at the top here, the name of the extension, I want you to start with View VS Code Extension Pack. View VS Code Extension Pack. Again, one thing to note for the extensions is as soon as you see an extension with an install button, when you click the extension and install, it'll be installed immediately into VS Code without the need to reboot. All right, so you can do that. Which is pretty cool. So View VS Code Extension Pack, although we're not doing Vue.js here this semester, which is a front-end library, it also includes some other really cool stuff, like, for example, NPM IntelliSense. It also includes Prettier, which is a code formatter, JavaScript ES Code snippets, and bracket pair colorizer all in one step, bookmarks, and so on. And I don't have to do all this with you individually. These are all individual things. So there's some really good things here. That's why I asked you to download this VS Code extension pack, which is kind of cool. All right, let's continue. So I'm going from the bottom up from my side. Okay, the next one is, so hopefully you've done that. Let's do the next one. VS Code icons. VS Code icons, VS Code dash icons, what it is. You can see that 6 million downloads, so it's quite of an active, extension. And what it does is it kind of adds some really cool icons in your VS Code folders to make it interesting in terms of identifying the file type and so on. So please download this. And again, all I'm trying to do is make it so that your VS Code looks similar to my VS Code. So you're not going to say, wait, Tom, why does mine look different than yours? Okay. So that's one. Next one is VS Code Essentials. Okay, so this is the next one. VS Code Essentials includes a lot of other things, and this is a really great one. Again, this is an extension pack. And by the way, if you have some of these installations already, for example, notice that VS Code Extensions also includes some of the stuff that I got from VS Code Snippets, or VS Code, extension pack. But it also includes things like GitLens and Code Runner and JustPad and a bunch of other stuff. So please download VS Code Essentials. All right, put that up there. All right, and that includes a bunch of stuff here. So pretty cool stuff. And live share audio, and a bunch of other stuff that's really cool. We'll talk about some of this stuff. Visual Studio IntelliCode. So kind of all in one step. The first extension was View VS Code extension pack. So there's a couple things in there that's not included in this one. That's why I got you to start down here. All right, let's move on. So once you've got VS Code Essentials, you get a lot of them already. Unity tools we won't be doing because we won't be building games together. But if you're a game programmer with Unity, then this is a good one for Visual Studio Code. Let's move up the chain here. You can see also have some shader language support for VS Code, but we're not going to ask you to do that. Regex previewer, which is regular expressions. We may include that later on, but I don't need you to do that right now. Again, I'm just moving up the chain here just to make sure you have everything that you need. NPM, you already have NPM IntelliSense from the other extension because I asked you guys to download that other one, which is pretty cool. So you can see there's just quite a few of them that are very good. I'm just kind of working through here to make sure that you have everything that you need. And I think for the most part, I think you guys are mostly good. IP address is kind of neat. I use this one if you want to know your IP address, on your machine. So I at the bottom corner, my IP address is kind of listed down here. You can do the same thing if you want to know your internal IP address. Sometimes that's important when you're hosting a server internally to understand what your IP address is for that. So that's one. Icon fonts is another one. Please make sure you install this one, icon fonts. All right. Again, 209,000 downloads, so it's quite an active one. So these two. GitLens we already have. GitHub, Git Project Manager. If you don't already have this, if it hasn't been installed, or Git History, make sure you grab these two, Git History and Git Project Manager. All right, so you have these two things as well. Again, guys, if you miss one of these installations, I'm listing all of my extensions on YouTube. Worst case scenario, you can go back and go, well, he has this one, and this one. I want those two. And your Visual Studio Code will look like mine. That's the idea behind this whole thing. I'm going to keep skipping forward. And ESLint is nice, but I don't want you to turn this on yet. So please don't download this yet. We'll talk about that in a bit. One thing I do want you to grab is document this. Okay, so please grab document this. Document this is going to include kind of a quick way of adding documentation to the top of your classes and functions. So please grab document this. Okay. And now on to the debuggers. You definitely need at least a debugger for Chrome. In this course, we're going to be using Chrome to learn JavaScript. Okay, so please grab the debugger for Chrome. If you're someone who likes to use Firefox instead of Chrome, they're very similar in terms of functionality. You can grab both. What I'm not going to be focusing on is Edge or IE, Internet Explorer. Although Edge has improved a lot, it's not something that I use at all. So I'm not going to talk about it, and I'm not going to focus our applications on it at all. Right, it's going to be more geared towards Chrome and Firefox. Right, there's other great browsers out there too. If you're someone who likes privacy, DuckDuckGo is a popular browser. I'm not going to gear for that browser either, or for Opera. Right, it's only for Chrome or Firefox. Okay, and just to control how much we want to target right now. That's the reason why. Again, those two debuggers are important. I'm moving up the chain here again. And I don't think there's much else that I'd like you to download. Again, you can see that Visual Studio Code supports different languages, C++, C#, and so on. Beautify is something else you may want to download. It may not be installed with one of the other extension packs, so you can download Beautify. Beautify and Prettier, what they do is they just format your code to make it look nice, and you can choose one or the other or both to color code your code. And I think it's important to make your code look nice and give you support. The rest, really, I would say, I don't think you need much of anything else from now. So I think that's it for extensions. So if you've done the extensions installation, check marks, please. All right. And you should be pretty good. So there's another reason, another underlying motive for me to get you guys to install extension is you're going to search for something when you're using Visual Studio Code. You want support for something that maybe it's not out of the box, and you might have an idea like, hey, I really want support for whatever you want it for in your mind, and so you search for the extension, and chances are someone's written something, an extension to use with Visual Studio Code to give you that extra functionality. All right, thank you for that. I'm going to move on now. So that is extensions for VS Code. I'm going to go back to this. One thing to note is I can toggle my Explorer window. This is what this is, the Explorer window, on and off. I can do that on and off as much as I want. For now, though, what I want you to do is let's add some simple files. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into New File. So click this button here, New File, and add in index.html. So this is our first file, index.html. And what I want to do with this one is I want to put in HTML. If I start typing HTML, notice that there's some suggestions, and you should get some of these. If I type in HTML5 and then press enter, you'll see that it scaffolds out a little, a quick way of putting together a little page for us right away. Let's undo that change and go back to this. So what this is, this little quick abbreviation stuff is something called Emmet, okay? So Visual Studio Code is built with Emmet in mind, okay? So this is another Emmet. There's different options here. So I'm going to use this one, HTML5, HTML:5 to do that, and then it kind of scaffolds this out. In your up on DC Connect, I've also put the Emmet documentation link, which takes us to here, Emmet documentation. So what is Emmet? Because we're not going to really focus on HTML5 or CSS in this course. It's strictly going to be more of a focus on JavaScript. I want to scaffold out pages pretty quickly. So what I can do, instead of me typing all this out by hand, I can actually just do something like this. I can say, okay, I want a list item inside of a UL, an unordered list inside of a div tag. So I can just type div greater than sign UL greater than sign LI, and it'll produce this. And you're going to see me doing that a lot, okay? That's child, if something that's inside of something else. If something is next to something else, let's say a div that's next to a paragraph, that's next to some kind of backquote or whatever, you can see that it'll look like this, a block quote. And you can also climb up. If I want to go up the chain, to kind of do different things, you can do this and it'll quickly scaffold things out. So much quicker than you would be able to do if you did it by hand, okay? And less error prone. And so that's why Emmet is a really popular way of writing HTML5 now, because it gets us writing things quite quickly. So that's Emmet, and I put the documentation link again up on DC Connect for you. Okay, so make sure you go there and check it out. When you if you fall behind, you can take a look at that. All right, so that's what I've done here. I've got I've kind of scaffolded this out, and I'm going to put this kind of change the title for the page. That's what the title tag is for, to Hello World. Hello World, hey, right? And I also want to put in some comments. So I want to say, let's put an HTML comment. This is what it looks like for those to review. Again, I'm assuming that it's been a long time since you've done HTML, even though it's not. And I'm just reviewing what this is. So I'm going to say this is my CSS section. Again, your code coloring may be slightly different than mine. It doesn't matter. And I'm also going to put my JavaScript down in here. This will be my JavaScript section. And we're learning JavaScript for the first time. And you're going to say, wait, what does this mean in HTML? Well, I want you to think about the first thing about JavaScript is, and even CSS, is I want you to think about your index.html or your HTML page as the manifest for everything linking together. This is kind of your entry point into the application, your HTML page, okay? And the way this works is that the browser will, kind of interpret each line of the code that's in here one line at a time. It'll go from the top, it'll kind of, go one line down. And then when I inject my CSS, it'll inject it, exactly what I'm saying here, and expand it right into line 8, let's say, if I was going to put it on line 8. Same thing with my JavaScript. If I was going to include a JavaScript file, it would be included right here. There's different ways of including JavaScript and CSS in your page. One way is to embed it in the page. Same thing with JavaScript. Guys, that is not done. It's not good form, and it's looked down upon by the developer community. Why? Because if you embed JavaScript here and CSS here, unless you're trying to work around a problem or something that you're having, it's only page specific, only for my index.html. If I make a new page, home.html or about.html or something else, that style and that code, the JavaScript stuff that I'm writing, is not available in those other pages, right? Because it's only specifically for that page when you embed, right? Which you can do. And I'm not even going to show you how to do it, right? Because it's not done anymore. We usually link a JavaScript file into the page, and then when the interpreter goes down, it injects it into the page. And that's the better way to do it. And that's the way I'm going to show you how to do it. Okay? If you really want to learn how to do it in line, you can. Again, I don't recommend it. And if I see it in your code, you'll lose marks for it. So please don't do it. Okay? So that's the first part. And if I was to save this file, and I want to look at, again, my desktop. So here's my desktop, and I look at week 1A. You can see that, sure enough, I have an index.html, because whatever I see in Visual Studio Code, I also see in my File Explorer. And normally what we would do is double-click on my index.html like this. And when I do that, if I double-click, and it's going to open up over here, you can see that, well, I've got nothing right now, but that's okay. And but what if I wanted to add in something? Let's add a body to my code. We'll do the same thing with Emmet. We'll say, I want a div tag, and inside my div tag, I want an H1, which is a first level heading, if you will, right? And if I press tab, or if I undo, if I click on it, there's two ways to get it. Click on it or press tab. If I click on it or press tab, I get this scaffolding happening. And let's put in hello world, right? And if I did this and press save and I go back to my web page, there's nothing, right? Why? Because you have to refresh. And that refreshing, changing, and then refreshing and changing and refreshing can lead to two things. One, it's a pain. And two, what if you forget, right? Yeah, enter works too. What if you forget? If you forget to refresh, you're like, wait, it didn't work, right? And that can produce problems. So there's another thing I want you to download, and this is where we get some issues. Okay, if we're going to get some issues here, I want you to download something called Light Server. How do we do that? I want you to do it in your command prompt. So I'm going to type in cmd, and I'm going to type in npm install. Follow me here. Light-server -g. And by the way, this could cause you to have issues, okay? This could cause you to have issues, and we're going to talk about the issues in a second. If I press enter, sometimes what you'll get is you'll get an error, right? And the error might look like this, where it pauses, right? Sometimes it'll just go through, okay? And sometimes you'll get a, as an example, you might get a, kind of something that says, I can't do it because you don't have administrator rights. So npm install, what it is npm is the package manager that's built into Node. Okay, so it stands for Node Package Manager. And I want you to think about what this is. This is like, other package managers that are out there. NuGet is something that they have on the Visual Studio Core platform. So you can use NuGet, Composer for PHP. There's Gradle for Java. There's a bunch of other package managers that you can have. npm is the package manager for Node. So npm package manager, we have a keyword, a verb that we use: install, uninstall, update, upgrade. Here we're using install as the keyword. So some kind of, hey, npm, let's install something. So we're installing a package, which is called Light Server, and -g is in the global namespace so that it's installed everywhere on your system. So any project can use it as well, right? If this isn't working for you like it didn't work for me, and it may not, you may have to run your command prompt as administrator. So if I run here and I right click as run as administrator, right? So again, I've pulled up command prompt and I right clicked here and I go run as administrator. And if I try that again, sometimes it'll give you a different result, right? So if I say something like npm install light-server -g, then you may get a different result. It may finish, right, like it does for me, okay? Or it may have a problem. If for whatever reason you get npm is not a recognized command, we need to fix this. If you're good and if you've installed this package now, then check mark, please. Okay. If you're on a Mac and you're running this, you know, kind of, you want to try and install stuff, yeah, it is always nice if it works. Yeah, for sure. But if you're on a Mac, then you have to use the sudo command, and same thing on Linux. All right, you normally can't install, use npm packages or install npm packages without the sudo command on Mac or Linux. Okay, unless you use something like Homebrew. Okay, so that is the first thing we've installed. We've installed Light Server. There's going to be other installations later this semester. All right, actually tomorrow. All right, so let's continue. So that's the first thing. So how does that work? Well, Visual Studio Code has a built-in, thank you for the check marks, guys. It has a built-in editor, right? So there's two ways to get it. You can get it through terminal, new terminal, which will bring up this editor, right? Or you can also get it by going to view terminal, right? So there's two ways to get it, right, that I'm showing you. You can also use control and backtick as the hotkey, right? So backtick is the character that's just underneath the escape key and to the left of the 1 button on your keyboard, all right? So if you press control backtick, you can toggle on and off your terminal window that's built into VS Code. Why is this good? And why didn't I do it here? Sometimes if I was trying to do an installation here, it would give me the same problem. It would pause, you know, or whatever. The strange apostrophe, yeah, it's called the backtick character. And sometimes it won't work for you, or sometimes it'll give you, this machine isn't, doesn't allow scripting, running scripts or something weird like that. And, you know, as an example. One thing that you can also do is you can choose what kind of terminal window comes up here. You can choose the default shell that you want to use. So if I select default shell, you can choose between command prompt, Windows, PowerShell, or Git Bash or something else. I'm choosing command prompt. You can certainly try the other ones if you want. Okay, totally fine. So why did I do this? Because what you should be able to do now after you've installed Light Server is run it like this, light-server. And if you do that and press enter, it'll populate the window like so. What I want you to do is I want you to tear this off, this tab. So make it independent. There we go. Let's put it over here. There we are. It's over here. And then what I want you to do is this tab itself, if it's maximized, I want you to use the command the window button and then right arrow. If you use the window right arrow, okay, so window right arrow, then it's going to push the browser on the right-hand side of your screen. And if I go back to Visual Studio Code and I press the window button left arrow, it's going to move Visual Studio Code on the left side of the screen. So it'll split screen between the two things. Again, you can move the delineation between one side and the other wherever you like. If you want less browser and more editor, you can do that or not. So okay, there we go. Mine can't be loaded because running script is disabled. Nicholas, can you give me that that message, please? And we'll fix that problem right now. Actually, like paste the exact message in there. Yep, there you go. Okay, yeah, that's right. So that will fix it. So it says scripts are disabled on the system. So if you get this error that scripts are disabled on the system, let's fix that problem now. So let's go scripts are disabled on the system, and let's maximize. To maximize a window, you can press window up and it'll maximize the window again, right? The window button up. If it says PowerShell says execution script is disabled, the fix for this on Stack Overflow, which works, is this one. Open up your PowerShell as administrator. So if I go to Window, the Windows button, and go to PowerShell, if I type in PowerShell, I want to right click here as Windows PowerShell and run as administrator. And then what you're going to see is something that looks like this. Windows PowerShell might be blue for you too. All right. It's up to you what the system that you have in. I want to type in this exact thing. All right. Just wait a second, Tom, and I'll go back to that. I'm just dealing with I'm dealing with an error that Nick is getting. So what you type in there, Nick, is set dash execution policy remote signed, like so, and press enter. You'll get this execution policy change that comes up, and you want to type yes, so Y, capital Y, and press enter, and it'll say, it'll take you to this prompt right here. Now, you should probably close Visual Studio Code. So if it's open, close it down and reopen it and try this again. And for Tom, what you need to type in, so I'm going to go back to this. What you need to type in is the following, light server. So you open up your terminal window here in VS Code and you type in light-server, just the way it was spelled before. So it's like this, light server. Okay, and it should bring up your default browser is what should come up on the right-hand side or on another window. I've just torn it off and put it here. And you can choose the positioning of your windows. For example, I can use the window key to move my window anywhere I want. I can move it to the left side. I can move it to the right side, as an example. I can move it maximize. I can minimize it again, or unmaximize it, right? I can move it around. And this is built into Windows, and there's a similar functionality for Mac. All right. So that's what these two things do. Why do I want to do this, and why did I do light server at all? It should be your question. We can hide this again. Control backtick will hide this, or you can just press the X. Doesn't matter. It's not going to stop this process if you press the X. Notice if I bring it up again, it's still there. Even if I press this, you can see it comes back up, right? If I press Control backtick. So you can see that I have those two windows open, and I've also toggled off the Explorer area here. You can also make it smaller if you want, if this makes more sense to you. I'm just going to turn it off. And if I change something, let's say, for example, I change hello world to hello, try this with me, to hello WEBD6201, and press save, then immediately you'll see the change. This is a great way to work. And the reason why is because if I change something here, you immediately see the change on this side. So it is a preview of what you're going to see immediately. It's almost like a little server that's running in the background that enables you to do, kind of see things without refreshing. All right. So this is a great way to work. And we're going to be working this way throughout the semester. Okay. If you've got this working, check mark, please, at this point. Okay. If you don't, X, and let's help this out, because again, I'm just trying to set up your tools so that everything works. Andre, what's the issue that you're encountering?
The first time I run the PowerShell script, it didn't work for me, but then now I pressed yes and then believe it changed, but
Okay.
it's just not
syncing.
showing the real-time changes for me.
You have to just try running light server again, right? And make sure you may have to restart your Visual Studio Code. That might be something you need to do.
Light server was in the CMD in the VS Code?
Yes, I put light server in there.
I also couldn't get CMD on the PowerShell in my VS Code.
That's okay. You can change that. So the way to change that is you press Control backtick, and if you choose when this comes up, the terminal window, you can choose Set Default Shell, right? And if you select Default Shell on the top there, you can select Command Prompt or Windows PowerShell. All right.
Okay.
All right. So that should set your. And then what you do is you want to close down your. If you click the plus button here on the terminal, you can set up as many terminal windows as you want, right? So I can have more than one. I can move from one to the other. So two terminal windows, and you should have a command prompt in the second one.
So in the command prompt, the command for the light server.
Light-server. Just type in light-server and it'll pull up your default browser. It's fine. Yeah, if Ubuntu is your default terminal, Tom, it should be fine too. Don't worry about it.
It's
And worst case scenario, you can
server.
Yeah, no space. Light-server like this. Light-server, and then press enter. And that should, if it worked, if you installed light server, it should pull up your default browser and it should put it up on the right side.
All right. So browser connected.
Right, and then you should see this part.
Yeah.
Browsers from us. Okay.
I
You good to go?
think I should be good now.
All right. How about you, Muzda? Are you good now? I run light server. It gives an error. What's the error that you get? Guys, I'm sorry. I want to make sure that everyone's good. So just bear with me while I help Muzda here. Right. So if you're getting light server is not recognized, did you install light server properly on your command prompt? Did it install? Did it go through the installation process properly? Have you tried restarting VS Code and try it again? Because sometimes what happens is if you run the command prompt outside of VS Code, or if you haven't restarted VS Code, then it'll fail, right? If not, I'll come back to it. Worst case, again, you can always double click and refresh, but I'll come back and try and help you out later. I'm going to move on, guys. I'm so sorry. All right, so I'm going to go back to this. I can hide this terminal, control backtick. Let's hide it. And so this is kind of our setup. And you can see that I don't have much. There's no JavaScript in here. Let's maximize this window now. So again, I'm just going to click over here on VS Code and then window button up arrow, which will maximize everything. Let's move over here on the left-hand side by toggling this open and closed. Again, if you hover over, it also gives you the Control-Shift-E as a shortcut. So if you press Control-Shift and E, as an example, you should be able to toggle this on and off. And if it's not Control-Shift-E as an example, so Control-Shift-E, if it doesn't seem to work for you, like it doesn't work for me, don't worry about it. Just open this up like this. Okay, the next part is we want to add a new folder. Let's add a new folder, and we'll call this folder content. This is the new folder. So you can add a folder this way, or on the right, you can right-click down here and go new folder. All right, that's a way to do it too. However, what if you make a mistake? What if you add another folder like I'm going to add right now? Let's add another folder. And let's add another folder to the same folder by accident, let's say. So I add a folder and we're going to call this scripts. Okay, I don't want my scripts folder, and it'll appear like this side by side. I don't want my scripts folder inside my content folder. So what do? I could erase it, but I could also just drag and drop it like this. Drag and drop. And when I do that, a little message will come up, say, are you sure? Yes, I want to move it. And it'll move the scripts folder outside of the contents folder. Sometimes it happens by accident when you put one folder in the wrong spot. Don't worry about it. And again, you can always check what it looks like in your operating system. Take a look at my operating system. My file structure is the exact same. If it's not this way, and if I change something, let's say, for example, I move something in my operating system, like I move scripts inside of my content folder in my operating system, immediately you'll see a change here in VS Code. All right. So nothing to be concerned about. And I can fix it here too. I can Control X here on my operating system, go back out and Control V here, and it'll update right here in VS Code. So not a big problem. It's a mirror of what you see here. Okay. So this is the first structure. What I want to do now is put two files, one in content and one in scripts. In the content folder, I click on the content folder. Again, you can click the button, new file, and type in app.css. Or in the case of scripts, let's do it the other way. Let's right click and add a new file. And you can add in app.js. So right now your folder structure should look like this. Okay. In my app.js file, notice that it brings up the different files here in tab format up here on the top. All right. So I can select my app.css up here. or click it and then it'll put it up here. And then I can just type in some comments. Of course, for CSS, we can type in a comment, multi-line comment like this, and we'll say something like custom CSS goes here, okay, and press save. And in my app.js, again, I can click here and go to my app.js, or I can click here and go to my app.js. I'm going to put the same comment. I'll say something like custom scripts go here, okay, and press save. So a couple of comments, they don't do anything. Remember, comments are ignored by the browser or by any compiler, okay, or interpreter. But right now, even though I've added these files into these directories or folders, they're not linked in any way to my index.html. And that's a key point here, right? If I don't link them with a directive or a command, right, then they will do nothing in my application. So let's link my CSS file. Unfortunately, you can't just drag and drop. That won't work, okay? So dragging and dropping, all it'll do is do something like this. That's not what we want, okay? But what you can do is type in some emmet. So if I type in link and then CSS, and if I press tab or enter, right, then what we want is to replace the href, which is my HTTP reference, right, to /content/app.css. Remember that / is indicative of the same level. If I put .. that's one level higher, all right? So that is just a relative path that takes me to my content folder, and then I look inside of the app.css. That's how I link things. Same goes with the script file. So instead of link, we're going to use script. So script source this time, script source, and then you can press tab or enter, and then you want to put /scripts/app.js. If you see me having doubles like this, it's because I have another extension that does that. Don't worry about it. Or if you don't see any kind of, you don't see the actual the file come up, but just the content, that's okay too. Just type in the file like this. So again, / means same level, right? So same level as my index.html, so on the same level. And then I am going into it, so down one into my app.js, and I'm just connecting it this way. All right, but if I go back to my browser, let's take a look at my browser now. So if I press the window button left arrow, and let's bring up my browser here, and I want to see the script kind of working on the browser, I have to have a debug view to do that. And one way to do it is if you right click on the browser and go to inspect or Control-Shift-I, then what you'll see is, you probably won't see this, you'll probably see something, if you've never done debugging before, you might see something that looks like this. So what I'd like you to do, because it's kind of cluttered this way, is maybe what you want to do is you want to kind of put it at the bottom of your browser, like so. So you can see the browser up here, bigger area, more real estate, and then down here you have some other things. Here we're focused on the Elements tab by default in Chrome. And the Elements tab, what you can do is you can expand the elements and inspect them. That's why I press right click and then inspect, which is what I did just now. Inspect, right? And so that's one thing we do. We can inspect each of the elements. I can inspect the body, and in my body tag, I can go into my div tag and click on my hello WEBD6201, right? And notice on the right, it gives me some styling, right? And this is the default styling that comes with the browser. These are called browser styles, all right, that come on the right side, all right? So display block, font size 2M, that's all default browser styling, okay, that's coming up here, okay? What we want to do is let's change this back to hello world. So you can see the change happen automatically. So hello world, not hello world, and save. You'll see that it automatically changes the stuff that's happening in the browser. This is good. The console tab is where we're going to see our updates for JavaScript. All right, so we're going to be working with JavaScript here in the console tab. Okay. Right now, there is nothing in the console tab because in my app.js, there's nothing in there either. Right? We want to make something happen in the console tab. By default, right? And this is the first part of JavaScript we'll learn today. is the default command is, and here's the long way of doing it, window.console.log, and then the name of the, or something you want to show. For example, app started. All right. And if I did this and press save, then you'll see app started at the bottom. All right. Why are you seeing this? Because we've linked it into the index.html. But my friends, there's no guarantee when this is going to load. Window is the window, the browser window. Console is an object that's part of the window itself. Okay, and log is the object that I'm looking at, the log. So this is an object within an object within an object. Okay, again, object-oriented programming 101. These are three different things. Notice that these are called, log is actually a method. If I hover over, it tells me it's a method. Console, right? You can see that the console is a property, if you will, or you can also look at it as an object itself. It has methods inside of this object. And window is kind of the higher level object that contains the container, the global this space that contains everything. Okay, so this is the long form of writing it. We don't need to write window at all because it's assumed when I write the console command, and if I save that, this is okay as well, console.log. And you'll see that very commonly up online, console log. And there's other consoles we can do, console info, console error, console warn, a bunch of them, all right? But console log is the typical one we do. But the thing is, there's no guarantee this will load. Why? Because the browser loads when it feels like it. And we want to wait, right? Because again, we're on the web, right? We want to wait until the browser's finished loading its content before we run our JavaScript a lot of times, okay? So in order for us to do that, what we want to do is we want to have another set of scripts to do that. One more thing is this: when we learn JavaScript, you're going to see in the book and in other places the var command, where I put something like var my variable. Var is like I'm declaring a variable. That's what it means. My variable name is my variable, and there are no types in JavaScript. It's like literally any, a type any, right? And if I say my variable is equal to 1, right? If I did that, and if I press save, and if I go to the console window and I start typing my variable, guess what? It's going to be there, right? It's going to be available in the global space, my friends. This is bad. We don't want my variables leaking into the global space for the browser. We want to protect my variables and any functions we make, all right? It's not forgiving. Let's say it's loosely typed like PHP, all right, which is bad. We don't want this to happen. We want to cure this problem right now from the get-go. So what we want instead is we want to encapsulate this or wrap it inside of a closure. And we don't want to even do this console log. We want the console log to be kind of kept inside of a function. Let's make a new function called, and the way we do functions in JavaScript, and we're learning this right from the get-go, is we type the keyword function. And the function keyword is going to be followed by either, it could be anonymous, so an anonymous function. If I was going to make an anonymous function, it would look like this, right? But if I wanted to make a function that's named, then I would just put the name here. So say function and the name. I'm going to use the keyword start. It's not actually a keyword, it's a word that I made, identifier for the function. And open bracket, close bracket, and then curly braces. You should see something similar like this in Java, C#, C++, and other places. I want to take my console log and put it inside of my function. And if I press save now, it will not show my variable anymore. The reason why it's, by the way, showing my variable is because that's what I put in here before. But now if I type in my variable, first of all, it doesn't exist, right? You can't clear the here at all. You can't clear the console, right? Can't do clear. I can't do that, right? So if I did like clear, that would work. That would console clear, that would work, but clear by itself won't. And this interactive console that's in Chrome, it won't be able to access anything, but I can access start. If I type in start, right? If I type in start like this and press enter, it'll say app started. My console in the browser is not showing anything. Well, try this. Try put start and then this. And make sure you save your file, Jackie. It doesn't matter. Firefox, even if I did Firefox instead of Chrome, and if I use the same localhost 3000, let's try this. Let's go Firefox, and then by hand, here's Firefox, and I put in localhost 3000, right? Look, here's hello world, right? And even if I was to make this, let's put this inside, let's replace Chrome with Firefox for a second. And I right click and go inspect element, which is what you probably did. And I go to console, right? You're going to see nothing. But if I type in start, then you should see app started. It should be the same. All right. Why? Because I've encapsulated my console log inside of my start function. Okay. But now still look, I can still activate something in the global namespace, which is bad. I don't want to ever activate stuff in the global namespace, right? Because that means a user can go and activate a function in the global namespace, right? So we want to encapsulate this stuff, right? I'm just going to go back to Chrome. We want to encapsulate this stuff even further. And the way to encapsulate it is to put it in something called, this is the first lesson, guys, something called an IFI. All right. By the way, if you're getting 404 up here, that means your light server is not connecting. Make sure your light server is running, Jackie. If you close down VS Code and rerun it, you have to rerun light server. Otherwise, it won't connect. For example, my light server is still running down here. See, this is kind of giving me examples of what it's doing. So you need to have light server running for you to have the browser sync happen. All right, so an IFI, what is an IFI? Let's maximize this again. So an IFI then is an immediately invoked function expression. Okay, so that's what IFI stands for. It's an acronym for immediately invoked function expression. Okay, and what this also stands for, or it can be known as, let's call it also known as, right, an anonymous self-executing function. That's what it is that I'm going to make right now. Okay, so how does it look? It looks funny. The syntax is pretty ugly, but it looks like this. Open bracket or open paren, function, 2 parentheses, 2 curly braces, 2 parentheses, and a semicolon. All right, and then what you want to do is inside of this space between the curly braces, you want to take your function and then populate it inside there, like so. Notice how the function goes dark. The function actually just grayed out. Why? Because it's not being called by anything. So theoretically, what I could do in this scenario, if I want to call the function, is just call start, just like we normally do somewhere else. Notice that it lights up. So if I was to comment it out, it's dark. If I uncomment it, it lights up. You can see that functionality happen. This is okay to do. And if you notice, if I press window left arrow, you can see now that I get app started here in my hello world, right? But again, I'm not comfortable with this when it's going to happen. I want to make sure that when the window finishes loading, that only then do I call my start function. And this is where I'm going to put my functionality in here, in my start function. So that in order for me to guarantee that, right? Let me just do that again. Not this, this. In order for me to guarantee that, what I want instead of this is I want you to type the following: window.add event listener, load, and then start. So if you don't know what this is, don't worry about it. I don't fret about it and don't be stressed, okay? Because my assumption is you don't know what this is, right? I don't expect you to know anything. Here's what we do know. This is a function. And this is kind of like, think about this as our initialization function, okay? You can have an initialization function like this. And what this is an event listener. And you should know about events and event listeners in some sense, because if you've done any kind of Windows programming, which you have with Windows Forms, let's say, and even if you were with me last semester with OOP 3200, then you would have done something with swing or something else similar to that, right? So equivalent, what we're talking about here is event listener is basically you're adding you're listening for any kind of event that happens on the window object, right? And remember what an event is, an action that's happening. So when the window loads, that's the event that we're listening for. This is how you do an event. By the way, we're going to talk about event handling next week in more detail. But when we listen for the load event, when the load event completes, then we call the start function. And this part right here, if I look at add event listener, you can see that it gives me some great code hinting. It says the window, whatever it is, right? So here's the event, the type of event to listen for, the type of event, and then the listener. What's the listener? The listener is a callback function. That's what we call it, a callback function. There's two ways to write the listener, okay? You can write the listener like this, where we have a named function. So when the window finishes loading, then we load the start function. And this is a cleaner way to look at it. But unfortunately, JavaScript is very flexible, like Nick said earlier. You can also write it inline, like this. Okay, you can also do this and put a console.log in here and not even have a start function. You can comment this whole thing out and it'll do the same thing. For example, if I press window button right arrow, oh, sorry, this one, you can see that it still says app started, right? Still says app started. So it's app started like this, or it's app started like this. Are we going to do arrow functions? Absolutely. That's the other way you can write it. I was going to go into arrow functions later, but sure, why not? We'll do it now since you're asking. So arrow functions just eliminates the function word and just puts an arrow in there. If you tried this, this is the exact same thing. More of an advanced thing, and there's other things we can talk about with what this does as well. But you can see that they're still getting app started. And to test this, app starts. I'm going to just change this so you can see that there's a difference here. You can see that once I've changed this, this is good, but this is not triggering anymore because it's grayed out. I'm doing an inline function. That's a way of doing it as well. I'm not going to use the inline function. I'm going to use the start function. You can see that it lights up again. And if I press save, now it calls this function, right? So there's, again, this is a callback function. I'm just specifying this one, okay? So again, the window is the window object. The event listener, I'm attaching it to the Windows object. I'm telling the window which event. It's the load event when the window finishes loading. And then what happens after the window loads, whether I want to do an inline function like I just did earlier, or do I want to call a name function? Okay, so that's what this does. So this is good. Why is it good? Because it's inside of this iffy, right? This immediately invoked function expression. It happens automatically. This is a self-invoking function. And it happens as soon as the window loads anyway. But I'm confirming that it's going to happen like so. This is a little bit overkill, but I'm extra specially sensitive to when the window loads. I don't want to assume anything with JavaScript. I want to make sure, I want to confirm that it's going to work this way. Okay. Are you with me? Did you do this with me? So check marks if you're with me, X's if somehow this is not working. Hey, Muzda, you're working. That's great. You can rewatch this video, absolutely. It's up on DC Connect. That's why I put the video up for you. All right, so it'll give you the installation steps, Michael, and anything else you need. All right, Jasmail and Ashok. All right, Ashok, did you follow along by any chance? I know that you came in late a little bit this morning. Okay, great. That's great. If you can put a check mark then inside of the check mark, please. Browser's working, but the terminal's not working. Okay, well, we'll try that out. Sorry about that, Muzda. We'll try and figure that out. All right, so if you notice that this is a step, we've done a lot here, all right? Actually, in secret, believe it or not. I've actually just shown you a bunch of stuff that that like my underlying motive is kind of complete for today. Your conversion is complete, right? Why? Because guess what? I've not shown you how to do things inline. I've attached a script file, which is right here, and I've shown you an iffy, which is right here. And this, my friends, is great. Why? Because if I try and run the start function right now, if I try and run start, it's going to go, I don't know what you're talking about, which is what we should have. And by the way, if I have some kind of variable in this course, if you ever see me do var ever again, please yell at me. I'm never going to use var ever in this course. var is an older JavaScript way of doing things, which allows something called hoisting. So if I said something like var, my variable, right, as an example, and let's say my variable is equal to 0, right? Right now, because it's inside my function, my little iffy, if I type in my variable, does not compute, right? It shouldn't be available for me. And it doesn't because it's inside this iffy, right? But what about when I want to do something like some kind of for loop or something like that, right? So let's suppose I want to do a for loop, and we'll talk about more about for loops later on, right? So I'll say something like, if I type in the keyword for, notice that Visual Studio Code has several different options. If I click the second option, right, it actually fills it in for me, right? So here's a typical for loop, right? Let's make it loop only 5 times, right? And let's make a little console log that's going to show the index. Okay, so if I press save, then we're going to see it loop from 0 to 4. Nice and easy, right? Right here in the console, right? Notice that I'm using the keyword let. Right? So the assumption is there's 2 words, let and var. If I use the var keyword, it's going to look the same, right? So I'll save it, looks the same. Your assumption is, whenever we have a for loop, by the way, the assumption is that the var index, the variable index, lives and dies, that's the assumption, within inside of this curly braces, right? That's your assumption because you've done C++ and you've done C# and you've done Java, and that's how scope works in those languages. But if I use var in JavaScript, and if I try and see what my var is down here, right, you would think that index should be undefined down here, yeah? Because it died inside of this scope, right? But if I save, then my friends, you're going to see that index actually shows up down here on line 22. By the way, notice it says that these are the line numbers that are executed. Line 22 is actually this index. But if I change this var from var to let, right, and if I press save, then you're going to see an error, which is what we want. We don't want this ever to work. So guys, we will never use var ever again. var, if I see var in your code, you've copied it from somewhere else because it's not from me. I don't give you vars. Vars are banned for our course, okay? Why? Because they're not safe to use. And nowadays, in modern JavaScript, we don't use vars. But unfortunately, your book and other sources on the internet still show var all kinds of places. Please just replace var with let, and then you're good to go. Okay, so then it'll respond. It'll do exactly what you think it's going to do, right? Otherwise, what var actually does in JavaScript, and I'll talk about this more next week or next day, is it does something called hoisting. Nicholas asks, does let work in every situation where a var would be? Yes. Yes, it does. All right. So again, what var does is it does something called hoisting. Let me just draw this up for you really quickly before we end for the day, right? So let's suppose this is your code block, right? And I have something that's declared with var kind of, let me undo that, somewhere down here, right? When the interpreter goes through and sees a var, what it actually does is it takes this var down here and hoists it way up here. That's what it does. It kind of puts it like way over here, right? Let me just draw the big ugly arrow up here. That's what it does. It kind of hoists it up here. And why is this bad, this hoisting idea? It hoists it inside of the namespace. So if I declare it in a for loop, so if I start typing for, var index is equal to 0, right, as an example where index is less than 5, like we said, and an index plus plus, this is a typical for loop, right, that we see everywhere. We've seen it in JavaScript. We've seen it now in C++, and we've seen it in Java, C#. It's the exact same for loop for the most part, right? We see this for loop. What actually happens is it takes this var, right, and it removes it from the for loop and puts it up here. That's what it does. It's called hoisting. That's the word, hoisting, right? And this hoisting that happens in JavaScript, right, is not a good thing. It causes a lot of consternation for developers because you're like, wait, what? How is that working? It shouldn't work. Why did I have this error? Well, because, we have a problem, right? Because of this problem. So that's what hoisting does. I'm just going to go back to this and to the browser for a second. No, that's not the browser that I'm looking for. It's this one. And let's get rid of this. So we don't need this. There's just an example of what I did with the hoisting. One other thing that gets hoisted is if we can declare a function in the same way as well. So if I said something like, so there's a couple ways to declare functions that we just saw. One way is this way, function start. The other way, here's way number 2. I can say something that looks like this. Var, God, kill me if I use this, var start is equal to function. That is also viable. So what's happening here? It's the same thing as start, but I'm using a var, right? I know it's terrible, but this is viable. This works. Look, if I save this thing, it's still going to do app started, my friends, right? Why? Because, you wouldn't like this. But however, this is not necessarily a bad way of doing things. We just want to replace var with let. Let declares the function and keeps it where it is. It's a variable, but it keeps it right here on line 12. It doesn't hoist it. If I put var in here, it'll take this function and hoist it all the way to the top, which was not what we want, all right? So why is this a viable function? Well, because you can actually do something that looks like this, right? You can create an arrow function, and this arrow function is a named function. By itself, this is an anonymous arrow function. But if I put equals, this equals operator is actually getting a reference to the function. Think about it as a pointer and storing it inside start. It's ugly, but it works. And it gives us a lot of additional functionality here that we can use later on, right? So think about this as a lambda expression, right, in other languages, which is kind of what this is, right? Absolutely. JavaScript is probably one of the most useful languages you'll learn. It'll empower the web. If you want to be a web developer, this is the course for you, right? If you hate the web, then this course could be very challenging because JavaScript is a challenging language to learn. But once you've learned it and you understand it and you've mastered it, you'll be a JavaScript ninja. And this is my goal, is to try and make you like little ninjas after this, right? In terms of how you cut apart the code and understand how everything works. So this is definitely a way. For us, what we're going to do is we're not going to use this method at the beginning. We're going to start off with a named function so that it's easy to look at, because this is something that you might be used to looking at more than the other ways. Not because it's better. And in fact, the preferred method is not this one. It's the other uglier way, Nick, right? The other uglier way with let start is equal to the lambda expression or the arrow function. All right, that is the preferred way. Why? Because I can always replace my start. I can always make my start point to something else, right? Okay, so example, let's suppose that I make a function like this. Well, this is a named function. I can't do anything about it, right? I can't do anything about this. So let's say I make it like this, the other way around. So I go let start, right? And equals to this function. If I did this, right? And if I press save, you can see that, well, yeah, but what if I did something like this at the end? If I said, well, you know what, now I want start to point to something else, right? I've declared start, but now I want to say that, have a nice day. Have a nice day. Which one do you think is going to be triggered? Do you think the first one is going to be triggered or the second one? And if you're going to notice, it's not going to be the first one because the second one has been good because it's been reset, right? So that's what's happening here. So the first one set up the variable start pointing to the first function, and then I've just reset the function, this variable, to point to something else, right? So that's why it's powerful, because I can have an anonymous function. I can have an anonymous function that that works the same way. All right, makes sense? That's why it's the more popular way of doing things. There's more flexibility. But again, for us, what we're going to do is we're just going to do function start, right? Which is totally fine as a good start. Okay, guys, we've done a lot of stuff, and I want to put this up on GitHub, and this is the last thing we'll do before we stop for the day. Let's put this up on GitHub, right? Now, I just made you download Git today. I'm just going to dial back this. I want to stop my light server. I can do this by going into my terminal here in VS Code and Control-C. And I want to terminate the bash job. I can clear the screen. So now I'm not running it anymore. You'll see that I'm getting errors here on the right-hand side now, right? So let's get rid of this. And I don't need this little diagram. What I want to do is I want to put this up on GitHub, and I want to use my server here, my little terminal, to do that. So the commands that you're going to learn are git init, which initializes my Git repository, right? And what that looks like when you make it is it creates a hidden .git folder, right? Git add dot, which adds all my files that I have here to the staging area. I'll talk about what the staging area is tomorrow. Git commit -m, initial commit, right? Git commit is a snapshot for these files. It takes a snapshot of the files, and initial commit with the -m action is I'm naming my snapshot. I'm naming my commit to initial commit, right? When I press enter, I can do that, and it names my snapshot. I can do a git log. A git log shows me my commit, right? And this is the commit number. The commit number is unique. It's been created as a hash of the time and my machine and what I've committed. And it has a special algorithm that's pretty much impossible to copy. It's going to be unique every single time, right? And notice it says initial commit. It dates it and it timestamps it with my author. Who is it that did it? Tom did it, okay? That's my commit. So I've just taken a snapshot, and this is local to my machine. But I signed up for GitHub, remember? So let's go to GitHub. And where I'm going to be storing all of your stuff this semester is on github.com/Durham Programmer, right? So Durham Programmer, I've made week 1A, week 1B, and you guys kind of are the third one. I'm going to do week 1C. Even though I've called ours week 1A, doesn't really matter. Let's make a new repository. Again, for you would go up on your account and do the same thing. We're going to go to public for the repository type. And don't worry, I don't expect you to do this at this point. Okay, we're going to do this together tomorrow. All right, so here, I'm going to go here and say the name of my repository, which is going to be WEBD6201 in the winter 2021 semester. And it is week 1C for you guys, let's just say. Or you might put lab 1. All right, doesn't matter. And then we're going to press enter. And what it's going to do is it's going to create an empty container up on GitHub. That's what it does, an empty container. And it gives us some steering directions here. I want to put in git, init, git add, and so on. We've already done these 3 pieces for the most part. We need to put these 3 pieces in place now. So I'm going to right click, copy these 3 little commands, go back to my command prompt and right click, which pastes everything in except for the last command. And if I press enter, it will, if you do this for the first time, it'll ask you to validate who you are and log in to GitHub. And then the credential manager that we downloaded earlier is going to remember who you are. And you're never going to have to do this again. So from your terminal, you'll be able to push to GitHub directly. Now, what if you really feel uncomfortable about using terminal window or your command prompt? Are you going to do bad in the course? And do I really care at the end of the day how it goes on GitHub? The answer is really no. I don't care. How you put it on GitHub, if you want to use GitKraken or if you want to use any other tool that's out there, some kind of visual tool like GitHub Desktop, as an example, I'm totally fine with that. You can do whatever you want. Here, for me, I'm going to be showing you how to do command prompts, right? Why? It's powerful, and it gives you more control over how you do your stuff. There's going to be a lot of things that we're going to be doing with the command prompt anyway, so you might as well learn the commands as we go. It's going to make you a more valuable developer, okay? So this is what I'm doing. So right now, if I go back to GitHub and if I refresh my screen, you can see that indeed I have everything that we did today. If you look inside of index.html, there's my code. And if you look at in my scripts and in my app.js, you'll see the code that we just did. Okay, so that's how you can check to see what my code is. And if my code is working and your code isn't, you can always check back in here and compare my code with your code. Okay. Why do I have a .history file but you don't? It really depends on how what extension you've activated. I may have deactivated that extension that adds your .history file. Don't worry about it, right? It's like a Git history. So if I look at Git history for my extension, I may have deactivated it, right? Here's Git history. And I think I've either disabled it or I've done something where it doesn't work. That's what's actually causing that to happen. But don't worry about it. It's not a bad thing to have history. All right. So that's this. And what I want to do is take this link, and in our DC Connect, when we do our in-class exercises, if it's not that, okay, I'm not sure. If you look it up, it'll tell you what it is, Nick. It's something else, another extension. I'm going to put a link here to my URL. It's going to be our kind of week 1 GitHub link, right? That's what it is. I'm going to open it as an external resource. So whenever we do something together, our in-class exercises, I'm going to post it inside of our in-class exercise area. And so you can always go back and look at it. All right, that's a lot. I've given you a whole bunch of stuff for you guys to do. So next day when we get together, we'll actually go through the PowerPoint and I'll talk about something called, progressive enhancement, which is kind of a, theory a little bit on how we should do our pages, as opposed to, and why JavaScript is important, and when do we employ JavaScript, as opposed to, how we're doing it right now. Right now, all we've done is done some simple installation steps with VS Code, and that's what I wanted to accomplish with you today. And I think mission accomplished for me. Hopefully you guys got something out of this one. And this will set you up for the next thing we're going to do together, which is more JavaScript, obviously. Okay. Any questions before we go for the day? Okay, if there's no questions, and again, you can put up your hand if you have a question, normally in the participants panel, and if not, that's okay. But if there's no questions, then I'll see you guys tomorrow at the same time and the same link to Zoom, and we'll continue with JavaScript part 2. Otherwise, that's it for me today, guys. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'm just going to stop recording here just in case you guys want to ask me a question outside of YouTube. All right, great.